Good morning and welcome. So I guess we're competing against some really other great virtual reality and other workshops that are going on, but it's great to have each one of you here. My name is Jim Breen. I'm the Director of Learning Services, and Learning Services is essentially education for InterSystems. Like John Palladino, I came and I've stayed a while. I've been with InterSystems for 17 years, and I'm actually the founding director of Learning Services, so we built Learning Services from the ground up when I came on board. Our topic today is accelerating time to productivity. So if you're in the wrong session, feel free to head out. If not, we're hoping to give you examples and models and answer questions. We want it to be as interactive as you want to make it. We really want to help you specifically, so we might be asking questions here and there if you want to get engaged. Please interrupt us, raise your hand, ask questions during the whole presentation. We're happy to do that so that we meet your needs. Presenting with me today is Doug Foster. Doug, I'll let you introduce yourself.
So I'm Doug Foster. I'm the manager of online learning at InterSystems. I'm the new guy. I pretty much, from an InterSystems point of view, just started. I've been here for 3 years. But really, my team focuses on the online learning. And our focus really is online learning and training for you, our customers and partners. So John's always told me, hey, if we train our internal people, that's bonus. But our focus is how do we help you, again, learn how to use the tools and become more productive so that you can build applications, that you can build solutions and help support your customers.
Great. So Learning Services not only covers online, but it also covers classroom training. We also have documentation that falls under our umbrella. We do the internship program. We have a leadership program. So there's a lot that's encompassed by Learning Services. And that's why we chose the name. We really feel that it's a service to our customers to provide them what they need to get up to speed in whatever domain really works for you. So before we get into the slides, I'd like to ask a couple of questions of the folks just to see who's in the room. So I'm wondering how many folks here have actually taken a classroom course from us, whether it's been at one of our offices or whether we've come to your facility? You can just, excellent, wow. Great. How many folks here have taken an online course? Done modules? Good. Okay. How about documentation and the doc writers? InterSystems folks don't need to raise their hands. I assume that you all have done these. Have read documentation or used documentation? Excellent, great. And we also have what are called labs, where you get your hands dirty, you get right into the code, you get touch our products. It's very similar to the experience session that's happening here. How many folks here have actually done a lab? Okay, good. And how many have done the experience session since they've been here? Okay. Something I would highly recommend. So one other question that I have, and I'm going to ask you folks to share a little bit, what do you hope to get out of this session? So again, we try to meet your needs, meet your goals, and I'm happy to not have you get up. I can walk around with the mic, or if you're very loud, you don't need a mic. Anybody like to share, what do you hope to get out of today's session with us? Besides the microphone. Anybody? Jane? Oh, yeah.
Hi, I'm Joan Waterhouse from marketing at InterSystems in Eton in the UK. I've popped along to enjoy Jim and Doug's session in order that I think that I can just better understand really what Learning Services offers and offers our customers and partners so that I, from a marketing point of view, I can help encourage and point people in the right direction because I think I don't know what I don't know.
Great. And I think from an internal perspective, we have a number of products, and we try to get our own people up to speed pretty quickly as well. So any other folks want to share? Sure, great. Thank you.
G'day.
He'll adjust it, don't worry about that.
Cool. I manage a team in Australia in relation to cache development, but also .NET and various other things. I don't think we've ever hired a cache developer because they're rare as hen's teeth. So we always hire .NET devs, and they come in and then they learn cache on the job. So those developers who are coming in are usually extremely very, very intelligent and all blah, blah, blah. But getting them skilled up in the realm of cache and InterSystem products is always a challenging.
Excellent. Good.
Yeah. So that's why we're here, to learn a bit about this.
Perfect. Yeah, I think a lot of companies experience that. They're looking for experienced, cache developers, but they might not find them in the marketplace. Anybody else? All right. So this leads really well into our first slide, which just disappeared. Okay, so the problem. Well, it really isn't a problem, right? Congratulations, you've just won this big contract. So it's maybe not so much a problem, but the challenge is that you just won this contract and you hired some new employees to support the new business, but they aren't experienced, like in the tools that you use or maybe in the InterSystems technologies. So it's a great thing, but then you go to the marketplace, like you were saying, I need some cache developers, you don't have them, or maybe it's one of our other products. Maybe it's TrackCare, or maybe it's HealthShare. So what do? So they come to us and we say, okay, so let's take this from a learning perspective, like a learning services. So we'd say the objectives that we would, if we would have worked with you and to help you solve that problem, and we've done this internally as well, these are the objectives that we would go after. So one of the things that we always hear from customers is we want to get them up to speed really quickly. So we want to shorten the learning curve for onboarding. So we don't want them to have to learn everything. We want to figure out what is it that they're going to need to shorten that curve, because there's so much in our technology, you could spend a lot of time learning. So how do we focus on that? Optimize curriculum and pace, and it's really in balancing computer-based training and classroom instruction. So we want to make sure that they're going at a good pace, at a good clip, that the curriculum is matching their needs, and we want to make sure that we're utilizing online learning as well as classroom, really to optimize the training, because you could spend a lot of time in online, you could spend a lot of time maybe coming to Cambridge or having someone come and deliver training. We want to make sure that they're getting what they need in the best possible way. Like you optimize it, it's like, okay, this goes before this goes before this. What is your background? So we want to really look at that. The third one is cover real-world challenges related to HealthShare and InterSystems Iris. So this was focused really on Iris and HealthShare, but it would be the same thing like with TrackCare for you, Jane. So how do we focus on real-world challenges? What are you going to experience? Like, what are the problems that are in the marketplace that we can help you prepare these folks for? They might be DBAs, they might be developers, they might be system integrators, they might, whatever role there is, right? We want to make sure that we're meeting those real-world challenges as opposed to just theoretical. The next one is provide access to learning in sandbox environments and all community resources. Okay, so the sandbox environments, which we talked about, the experience labs, so that they actually can get the hand on the code. Any classroom training that you take with us, you're actually doing that. You're getting into like a live system, you're building something, and you're reinforcing what you've learned, from the trainers or from more of the theoretical piece. You're putting it into practice. The community resources, there's a lot out there. How many of you have heard of the developer community? How many have actually posted on it? Oh, okay. Or read an article? Read articles? So the community is a great place to go to learn from really fellow users of the technology. It could be about anything. You can ask questions there, you can post. If you post a fair amount, there's badges you can get, like there's an affinity program. So it's not just the developer community, there's also a global masters community, and then there's a lot of other resources like out there besides what we run to provide knowledge to your folks. So that's another way to provide access to learning. And the last one is balancing InterSystems produced training with internal training. And this is sort of key, is it's not just us. Like, you're a big piece in this. What you do in your companies to get your people up to speed quickly plays a big role in that optimization, that shortening that learning curve. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so you have the objectives, and then you need to create a plan. I think often we hire people and we can say, oh, they're going to learn. We'll just hop onto online or go to a class, and it's going to be everything. That's really not the way to do it if you want to optimize. You really want to get people into a plan. So you might have heard, you either plan. If you fail to plan, you're probably planning to fail. So you need to put a plan in place, and that's why you would have objectives. So these are the things that we would say is, one, define the roles, like the persona that need training, because all roles don't need all the training. There's certain things every role needs. Define the key tasks and desired outcomes. So you want to say, okay, so what you're doing in this course, or what you're going to be doing in your job, needs to produce these outcomes. And what we do with our online learning and our classroom is saying, these are the objectives, and by the time you're through with this class, you're going to be able to produce like these outcomes. So they're really the KPIs that we're looking at. The third one is review available structured training. So you might want to look more into your organizations and say, okay, so what exists right now? Like, what's structured? What does InterSystems provide? And how do we put that all together? as opposed to just saying, oh, these are all the things out there, go and learn. The next one is evaluate informal development opportunities, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the informal is more, how do people learn from other knowledgeable experts, like mentors, or how do they learn from their colleagues? How do they learn from the communities that we have? So there's a lot of informal learning that really reinforces knowledge that they're gaining in classroom or online, or actually answering questions that they might not have had. And we've seen that like in different programs that we run, especially with our interns. I think one of the funniest things is when we first had our interns come, and we'll talk more about this, we put them in one room. So we had like 30, 35 interns. The first year we put them in cubes, and then the second year we put them in this big room. And then from then on, they all wanted to be in the big room because they felt like they learned a lot more from their peers that were either struggling with the project that they're doing or some of the technology, and they could share knowledge. Whereas when we put them in cubes, they didn't learn, they didn't produce as much as we have done in the following years. So that was a big lessons learned for us. It's like, yeah, it's really important that they can just talk to each other, and that's how a lot of knowledge is imparted, is through that. And that's why classroom learning is really great. Often people retain more knowledge is because they have that opportunity to share in a classroom, whereas online, sometimes it's more individual. But we've been trying to remedy that a little bit by having these communities where people can talk to each other. So, okay, and then blend together over a realistic time period. So one of the biggest challenges that I think we see with a lot of our folks is they don't give them time, or they don't plan time. And Jane, I'm sure you've seen, like in a lot of our, we have all these contracts and we got to implement quickly, that we don't let our people continue to learn. Like we don't build time in for them to learn, and you have to do that. So you need a realistic time period because things don't happen overnight. And if you don't build in that period, they really won't learn, or they're trying to do it late at night and they won't retain the knowledge. Right, so to cover what the other person was doing. Yeah, exactly. So it takes planning. So it goes back to that plan. And then give feedback and iterate. So that's something we all should be doing. Like that's how we learn the interns, and every year it's just gotten better and better. And we've done it with our folks. And talk to the people. Like when you bring somebody new on board or you give them a new project with a new technology, you got to talk to them and say, so what worked, what didn't work? So that the next time you do it, it becomes even better. Okay, and starting with the who, Doug?
Yeah, so really what we do, and this is kind of a traditional instructional design approach, but start with thinking about who are the people that you need to train, right? What are their roles? And you'll hear us, we keep saying personas, right? So it's not always by title, it's more by the role and the specific tasks that they're doing. So we go down and look at things like, oh, they're an HL7 interface specialist. And we say, we actually had a lot of debate of was it an interface developer or a specialist? But some of that is because we say, well, we've got some people that develop the interfaces, and they're mostly in Ensemble, doing productions. And our developers are people that are writing code. They're using .NET or ObjectScript. So we very specifically took the word developer out of that title so that we could say, no, this is somebody that's not necessarily developing deep code. They're focused on interfaces, right? And we look at things, a database architect, a system administrator. So some of these we know in different companies, so we lay them out so that we can divide things. And then you might, in your company, say, well, this person really fills two roles, right? They're going to have multiple things. But when we're starting to divine the training, we really want to get it down to some of the specific who's and some of the personas. And then we start looking at what their level of experience or knowledge in the role. So both what is it currently, and then where do they need to go? So we're looking at the gaps. And this is different. So if you think of bringing in somebody, when we bring in certain interns, they've come in with some computer science background, right? So they do know languages, but they probably have not really developed on a large-scale project, right? So they understand the code, but they might not know good development practices or how you develop in big teams. So you need to try to balance that and say, well, also, what do they need and when do they need some of it? Because in certain cases, we just need to accept that it's going to take some time for them to get up to speed. We'd all like, the magic pill. You say, okay, boom, you know how to program, here you go. And we've done that a couple of times. You kind of throw the interns into a project, and they make progress, but you go back and look at it later, and you're like, we really wouldn't code it that way, right? So you don't want to let them go kind of too far. So once you've figured out, yep.
So for each of the personas, do you guys have a recommended curriculum? For example, if we brought in an interface specialist and the scope of their duties was to work on the interfaces, you would recommend that they take course A, course B, course C. So do you guys have any kind of recommendations or any documentation that would outline the training program for them?
So we then break it down into the what, into the tasks. So we have a curriculum, building your first HL7 production, actually, is one of them. Taking somebody from the beginning all the way through the end. And generally that's targeted at an interface specialist. And so it's kind of a mix of the two, where we start with a persona and then we get down to what task is that person going to do, and then we'll do the curriculum at that lower task level.
So it sounds like you offer all of this training content, and it's up for us to put it together to figure out what training goes first, what training goes second, in terms of how adults learn.
So I'm going to help answer this a little bit. So what we're doing is a little bit of both, right? So we're happy to work with you. So one of the things is in different companies, different roles, they might do different things. So we could work with you and say, okay, so what are the things you're trying to accomplish? And you have named this role. And we could say, okay, so typically we would go through this path, but maybe it's a little different for your company.
Yeah,
so
I just think that, so maybe just a recommendation.
Yep.
A lot of times I don't know what I don't know. And so I'm trying to put together this program and trying to hire the right skill set, but I'm going into it kind of blindly. So if I kind of contrast this program with like IBM, for example, they give you kind of the building blocks and the courses that you should take in order to become an intermediate systems administrator, for example.
Okay, and we can, as we get towards the end, we can show you some of our learning paths and resource guides that we have, because that helps lay out some of that.
And another thing that I'll mention too is we're creating certification. You might have seen the flyers on the tables. So in those, if you want to become like that role and certified in that role, you'll see what the curriculum would be for you to pass those exams. So you'd have a better idea of that. And these are the things that we want to hear from customers, is like, what is going to help you the most? So, great.
So again, as we look at the what, we do try to get both the role and down to the task. So we say, okay, yeah, both developers and admins need to know how to troubleshoot productions. But do developers really need to understand about backups and mirroring? It's like, they might need to know that it exists, but in general, they're not going to be involved in that. And you could take an example, a database architect really needs to understand how to design for high availability and put pieces in place. The admin needs to know how to manage that. But they may not be doing the design. They're doing the day-to-day, what do I keep track of, what do I look at? So we try to look at those and be able to say, well, they might just take this high-level overview part of the course, but they don't need to go much deeper into it, where certain people are going to dive deep into other topics.
Okay, so we're going to look at this like from a puzzle perspective. Thank you. And what are the pieces of a puzzle to really accelerate, time to productivity? So the first thing we would say is, okay, let's see what does InterSystems offer you, like in your company. So again, it could be a new hire, but it could be somebody that's been working for you for a while, right? So they might know some of the stuff we have, or maybe they don't know. And maybe there's some skills they already have, and maybe there's some skills they don't. So you want to look and say, take an inventory. It's like, okay, so we have online courses, we have resource guides, which we can talk about a little bit later or show more if you'd like, or learning paths. So a path is really sort of setting what we would say is like, you want to learn this? Here are the things you need to go through in order to achieve that. So right now, if you look at our online system, you can look at learning paths and you can get an idea of that. Again, we're here for you providing services, so if you want to work with us, we can actually help you design that specifically for a person or for your company. So let us know that. Interactive labs, so again, the hands-on piece, it's huge, it reinforces learning. I think the statistic goes from like 60% to like 90-some-odd% of retention and knowledge when people actually put their hands to the keyboards and apply what they've learned. Classroom courses, so again, if you look online, you'll see all of our classroom courses. And again, we could look at the folks that you want to train, like if we're going to go to your facility, we can customize our classroom training specific to your needs. You might say, oh no, our guys know HL7 and how it works with your system. We can eliminate that from one of the days and those kind of things. So we can really customize to your needs for learning. And then documentation, tutorials, first looks, these are all things that tell you about our product and other ways to learn our product. So that's like one piece of this puzzle. The next piece are really two areas of InterSystems that sort of really support learning and support knowledge or solve problems or tell you like what you're going to need to do and what you're going to need to learn. So the first one is really the WRC. So this is our technical support. John Palladino, who spoke this morning, that's his baby. We provide great support. We have high retention. We have high scores. So people can call any kind of problem. They don't know something. And what we do is we sort of monitor. If we get a call that we find out that a lot of people in the marketplace are not learning something or they have the same question, then we build that into our training, whether it's classroom or online, or we document it. Our document writer, we have two of our writers in the back here. We put it into documentation so that people can find what they need as quickly as possible. So again, it's accelerating to productivity very quickly. So that's one way of support. And the other is sales engineering. So project-specific problem solving and debugging, and solution architecture. So what a sales engineer does, if they're working with you on a project, they'll tell you, like, this is what you're going to need for this project, and these are the people you're going to need, or this is the architecture you're going to need, and then you look at the roles and you say, okay, so what is the knowledge that those folks are going to need? So they actually help you build, if you will, a plan for training or a plan for implementation or a plan for whatever you're doing. So they're great. Like, they're often our eyes and our hands, like in the marketplace, like working with customers, that then they come back to us and they say, of all the customers we talk to, they all seem to need these kind of things. Then we build it into our training. So our training organization is very iterative. Like, we definitely want to hear from folks. Like, we're always monitoring our classroom training. We used to print all of our training ahead of time, and then we got to the point where it became, after every course, a trainer comes back and they'll actually change what's in the training from what they're learning from the customers in the training. So our training manuals are really, what is it called, like on time or on demand, I guess it would be like that. So we print our stuff really on demand because we know the market's changing, things are changing, people are using our technology in different ways or have specific questions, so it's always updating that. Yeah. And then the last piece here is our company-specific training. So that's really you. So what is the specific training that you need to do in your company? And often that's forgotten in this whole pieces of the puzzle. Like, that's often a missing piece. And if you can't integrate that with us, or if you don't look at that piece, then you won't accelerate quickly. Like, if you want to get up to speed really quick, you need to have this piece in there. So it's like internal training at your site and experience-based training targeted to the requirements of a role or a task. And often companies forget that piece. They put it all on InterSystems and say, we want you to train our people, we want you to get us up to speed. And for us, it's like, so what's reinforcing that? What's going to engage the people? And Doug, I think you're going to talk a little bit about that. Experience-based?
So when we say experience-based training, what do we really mean? And I think this is one of the keys that we've seen both internally and with our customers makes the biggest difference. So what we would recommend is assigning some sort of technical mentor. So we do this with our internal folks. And really what I mean by that is someone that can help do code reviews, for an example, right? So, or fill gaps, provide some of that institutional knowledge of, okay, here's how we really manage this. Not just, oh, here's how we do change control, but here's kind of some of our design philosophy, some of the tricks of the trade that we've learned over time, or even who to go to for different help. Now, some of the ways that we do this is we develop kind of a phased set of experiences. So how do you help someone walk in? And this is really what we do with like our interns and our support people, is they start being able to review and explain back to the mentor someone else's code, right? So that's the first thing, is they can read and understand code. But have them explain it to somebody, because sometimes we'll admit, you'll say, hey, go look at this code. And they're like, okay, now go do something. It's like, no, come back and talk to me about it. Ask me questions about it. After that, what we do is we do some work out loud sessions. So you can start with having the mentor who's writing code talk about what they're doing, right? And you have the new developer watching, listening. Why are they doing that? What are they building in? Oh, don't forget, here I'm doing some error checking. Here I'm doing this. Then you have them go in, look at some code, debug a simple issue, right? So these are all just little steps. Debug an issue, then take some code that we know is nice and stable, and you're going to add a small piece of functionality. So we're not letting them go write huge amounts of code, small controlled steps. And then finally, you have them, okay, now build a production from scratch. And that might just be something even on the side, but have them test them out that way. So again, for us, we found it was really important to give them those steps and even have them do extra training or learning. Because it's as they go through this, they might have taken the course, they might have looked at the documentation. They don't get it until they're trying to do the code themselves, until they're debugging it. They'll go back and look at the material again, and all of a sudden they'll get that, oh, okay, now I really get what that means. So you're trying to help them progress in a safe manner and help them along the way. So also, as Jim had said, the internal training, we do a lot of process documentation, so we use Confluence. So a lot of our internal checklists, even someone new on the online team, we'll give them a checklist of, go look at this. Here's our process for setting up a new course. Here's our process for this. So for us internally, a lot of that, we don't have a lot of the formal training on our internal process, but we have a big checklist of, hey, we know all of the pages that we use as I'm producing something. Go take a look at this. Read this, then go do something. Read this, then go talk to somebody about it. So don't forget that. It's the sharing sites, tell them about if you have Slack channels that they should subscribe to. What other tools are you using? We have people walk through just creating Jira tasks and some of the standard things that we do, but it seems simple, but you're integrating them into your process.
It's really like this whole blended mix, right? So I'm just gonna hop back for 1 second. The work out loud piece that we talked about, so that was used internally at InterSystems. Like, we didn't realize it in the learning organization. It was actually used in our support organization. So when they were looking to bring support advisors up on how to be a good support advisor, so that's like answering calls and solving problems. The work out loud would be a support advisor would be talking to one of our customers about their problem on the phone, and then their mentee, the person that's learning to become a support advisor, sits there and listens to the conversation. And as the support advisor is solving the problem, he's talking out loud to the customer. He's like, okay, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to do this to your system, or I'm going to administrate. And we heard about this because they have their own, they have a way of learning and bringing their people up to speed really quickly, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. We said, wow, that can be used in so many different ways. It's not just in support. It could be for developers. It could be for administrators. It could be for track care, system implementers. It was great. So it's a tool that we put in our tool chest that we wanted to share with you. We're going to talk about 3 different did you want to add to that?
Go ahead. Yep.
We're going to talk about 3 different programs, really different models, from which we really learned about how to get people up to speed quickly. And it goes to show you like different needs or different scenarios. And this is what we ran into. So we've been running an internship program now for, I think it's like 10 years. And this year we had someone in the vicinity of 39 interns that came to InterSystems. Now you think of interns like in the summer, you have about, if you're lucky, you have 8 weeks. And when we hire interns, we hire really smart kids, so they have to be hireable from our perspective. John Palladino talked about the tests, the assessments. They have to go through those and be successful to be hired as interns. So we know right off the bat we're getting these really smart kids. But they're not all CS majors. Some of them are math majors, some of them are physics majors, so they might not have the background that we need for them to have to be successful. And our internship projects are all real projects, like they're working on something that's going to help us internally, like in our systems, or maybe sometimes it's even with customers. So it's not like throwaway projects. So when we bring them in, we have a number of projects and then we have a number of kids, but we don't know who's going to be best suited for those projects. So what we got to do is like, okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to train them. And because we don't know what project they're going to be on, we're not sure exactly what training they're going to need. So we put them through the whole gambit, and it's a lot. It's like this, it's a fire hose of training for a number of weeks, really 3 weeks. So at the end of the 3 weeks, we get to know them and we understand where their strengths are, and then we assign them projects. So when we go through this whole 3-week overview of products and classroom training, we split them up. What we've learned over the past is like, okay, so how well does this work? And the things that we learned are, it's a tough way to train them because they may only use like 50% of what they learn, maybe even 20% of what they learn, but it was the only way that we could really continue that part of our internship program. So we learned, to accelerate quickly, to get to productivity quickly, that's not the best way, but in some instances, that's sort of what you need to do. But through that, we learned about the work out loud stuff. We also learned about, putting them in the same room in an open area, like open places where they can discuss and learn from each other. We learned about the hands-on. The mentors are key to the success of that program. Each intern is given a mentor, and they're also given what we call a customer. So the customer is the person that's, whatever the project is. It's like, you're doing this for me, learning services or marketing or sales, and they work on that as a customer, so they learn the customer piece. They learn how to be, they have a mentor that's there, a technical mentor, and then a mentor just to get to know the company. So we put all these really supports in place, and we give them a checklist of things that they need to do when they're not working on their project to learn more about the company. So we have many goals, and one of the biggest goals, and the reason we keep them going through all the training is we want them to be really advocates or ambassadors of our technology when they leave. Because we started to say, we assign the projects first, and they can learn what they need specifically. But we want them to go back to school, and we want them to know like our full stack, and that they could then use it in their projects or use it in papers, or when they go to their companies or they start companies, they can use our technology. So that's why we're keeping it that way. So that's,
Yep.
Are there any questions so far? This is probably a good time to ask as we go.
So one of the things, we had 3 learning interns doing projects for us. So we're working on a learning recommendation engine for you all. It's machine learning based. But to really integrate them, we had done a lot of training, and they have technical mentors. One of the other things that we found, so we run Agile and we do Scrums, is we would do a daily stand-up with the interns. So, because one of the things that we learned, especially with someone new, just learning how to code, leaving them alone, right? So it's that working in a big team, working on a project, daily check-ins, we could find out really quick if they weren't getting something, right? So that was another piece. It made it, I didn't want to have check-ins like, oh, how's it going? But we taught them through daily stand-ups and scrums. What are you having problems with? Where are you still in the code? And it's like, okay, and that's where we could call in a technical mentor or even someone else. We had different times where they were like, oh, I'm not exactly sure how this function works. They could sit down with the developer that wrote that. I mean, that's the joy that we have. And so we would go have them sit with someone else for a while and do the project. So we could very quickly catch if they weren't quite getting something. And I think that's another way where you can really accelerate things. So I'll go on and do the WRC, so our support team. Again, they really have a model for how they like to train. And they had started off, now we have a learning management system. This is now in there with a program. It gets assigned to them. They started on an Excel spreadsheet, right? It really was broken down. Here's our basic training that everybody's going to get. And then as support people moved to different roles, they had different checklists. They did a lot of things. They would always start off with classroom courses. They integrate our online learning, but they spaced it out. So if you think of support people, I know you had mentioned this from implementation, is you can't just constantly be pulling them off the line. You have to train them, start having them do small tasks, right? So this is where they were doing work out loud sessions. They have a process where they have somebody, a support person will start by responding to email tickets because their mentor can review that before you send it back, right? And it takes a while for them to be doing live calls. So it's that progression that they go through that's really important. So they watch videos, they complete tasks, they start reviewing customer issues with the mentor, and then even we'll do some other interdepartmental trainings, right? So other things that the product team is going on or the product is rolling out new functionality, they'll go and do some of that training. But it's spaced out over time. We really do assume that for a support person to get up to speed, it will take months. So we're trying to build that training into a larger process, get them up to speed to be able to do this set of tasks, and then keep kind of growing what they're doing as their experience grows and their training increases.
I think you start to really see a pattern in what we were showing you, right? It's having that plan and making sure that you use like all of these to your advantage, like having a mentor, defining a role, what are the KPIs, you know, what is the best environment for them, how do they fit into your system? Like all these things are key, and these are the things that we've identified as we've gotten into different programs. This last one, the Technical Career Development Program, essentially what this was solving a problem that we had in our company. We were looking to hire more young developers, and we were trying to figure out like, okay, so they need to be at a certain level for them to be a developer in our company, like they have to have a certain capability of being able to develop. So what we did was like say, okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna hire people into the company and we're gonna give them this chance to be a developer. And if it doesn't work out as a developer, that's fine. They're smart, they're hireable, we can put them in other roles, they'll be successful. And they all agree to this. And we say, okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring you in and we're gonna train you in a certain area of development. So it's on our product. It could be, you know, Iris developer, it could be a health share developer, it could be a track care developer. And from what we've identified from our other programs, we say, okay, we're gonna give you exactly the training that you need in order to do this project that we're gonna ask you to do. And at the end of, originally it was gonna be 6 months. Now we have it down to like 4 to 6 weeks. So they go through training, they're done within like a week now. So originally, I don't know if we have it up here, it went from 4 weeks to 2 weeks. So 1 week is in the classroom, another week is more the hands-on piece of training. And then they're off, and they have like 2 to 4 weeks at the most to really get this project done. But we figured out like what are the best ways to learning. So it's not just in those 2 weeks, right? They have a mentor, they have a technical mentor. So we learned that from the interns, and we put them around people on the team that are working on the same project. And we've had amazing results. You know, it's worked out great. And we've had some of the developers, they've actually completed their projects, but they're like, this isn't for me. Like, this isn't what I really am passionate about doing. Because during that period of time, we also exposed them to other roles in the company, just as part of the program. And they're like, you know, as much as I like development, I really love being a sales engineer, or I love being a trainer. I want to be in learning services. So for us, it's really just a win-win. But we needed to be able to do this quickly, to be able to keep hiring people and keep that, getting young blood into our developers, you know, into that development program. So it was a great program. It started as a POC, and now we do this twice a year. We're looking to even do it more times a year. And the number of folks that we bring in, I think we originally started with, I think it was 4 to 6, and now we're somewhere in the vicinity of 12 developers at a time that come in and do this program. So like all 3 of these programs, there are those specific things that you can really accelerate time to productivity. So for us, it might be on hiring, but for you, it's really whatever your company does, right? Is it a developer? Is it an administrator? Is it an integrator? These are key pieces that you can use to do that. If you could flip to the next one. Okay, so really just in review, like these are the different pieces of the puzzle. So everything that we have, including learning services, like call us. We're more than happy to help you. We've worked with implementers. We've created like learning plans for their people in certain roles. And say, like we worked with PwC, we came up with a path and said, okay, so you want to get integrators up to speed really quickly? Let's do this together. Okay, you're going to take this. What do you have in your company? What kind of programs? Okay, we'll build that into this. You're going to come to training, or we're going to go to you to do training. We'll customize that. And they're up and running, you know, within a few weeks, which is very impressive. Like you just don't see that in the marketplace that often. And then all the other support, like the WRC, sales engineers, great, take advantage of them. They're a wealth of knowledge. They're really the diamonds, I think, in the company. And then the experience-based training.
Yep. Yeah, so I think really, like, these are all the resources that we use. We do recommend, you know, when you think of experience-based, it's not always formal. Right? So the developer community, that's one of its goals, is somebody's working on something, they have a question, you want to ask someone else that has been through the problem. Has somebody had a problem doing this? Has anybody else tried to solve this? Because what you'll find, even if you go out and you're just looking and reading through it, you find people that have built little pieces of code or solved certain problems, and they're posting out there. right? So those are the types of things where you can use that as an additional resource, just to see whether, how have other people tackled this problem? What else have they done?
Great. Are there any questions? Anything that we covered or didn't cover or you'd hope to get out of this session? All right. Michelle.
Oh, okay, so Michelle is giving some self-promotion. So Michelle, wave to everybody. She's one of our learning services people. She is in the tech exchange sitting kind of right near the front table. And one of the things that she's been doing all week is meeting with companies like you and showing them, hey, here are the resources that we have. Here are the different learning paths. And she can actually sit and walk with you. Okay, here's something we have for an HL7 developer. Here's something that we did with getting up to speed for our system integrators. And here's a whole learning path that we developed for that. But then be able to talk to you a little bit about it so you can say, you know what, we're not quite to this level, so maybe we don't need this. What does this include? And be able to walk you through some of those different resources. And what are the differences? Like you hear us sometimes talk about a learning path versus a resource guide. And that's mostly for us. To me, a learning path is something where we help you get from point A to point B, right? I didn't know how to build a production at all, and at the end, I'm building an HL7 production and sending, HL7 messages, right? So we have those types of learning paths that help you progress through a set of knowledge, and then we have resource guides, which is probably, more focused, optimizing SQL code. There isn't necessarily, we don't have like a path for that. It's here's a bunch of resources that you can use depending on the problem that you're having to optimize your SQL. Here's some different videos that we have, other sessions, the documentation that can help you walk through that. But there are a lot of resources up there. That's actually my biggest problem right now is I think we have 500 and something objects. Carlos said 50,000 courses, it's 500 and something. We've had 50,000 course starts. So people have taken 50,000 courses. But even that 500 courses can be a lot. And one of the things that we're working on is using now our new capabilities in AI and machine learning to build a recommendation engine for you. That can go through and you can answer a couple questions of what are you trying to do, and it will build out a set of recommendations. Or once you start taking courses on .NET, it should be able to say, hey, we have these other .NET resources that are useful for you. So that's one of the things that we're trying to build in because there's so much content, but also everybody's different, right? They either might like videos more, or they already, they're a very good .NET programmer. They don't need the basics when they start ObjectScript because they understand object-oriented programming already. But just jump in and kind of help them get from that mid-level up, right?
So everyone can hear it. My name is Josh. I'm one of the people in documentation. This is Josh, also in documentation.
So we only hire Joshes in documentation.
We have access to everything, and I mean everything. So even though there's lots of attention going on how we're going to make it easy for people to use Iris starting today going forward, if you are looking at how to use Cache 4.1, I can get you there in seconds.
Great. So again, all these resources out there that folks don't know. And that project that Doug was talking about machine learning and AI to recommend, that was done by an intern. Like we had an intern working that project. So it's like the Amazon model. Oh, you like this product? Here, you might like this or this or this. So. I think we're at time, and I hate to hold people from lunch, so unless there's any other questions, Doug and I are here for the rest of the day. Please come talk to us. We'd love to hear from you. And again, being iterative, we would love to hear from you if you have things that work really well for you in getting people up to speed quickly, and feedback on our presentation. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of the summit.
Thanks.
Thanks, Doug.